Hello, and welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Imagine this. You step off the plane, onto that perfect sandy beach, turquoise water everywhere. It's the Maldives dream, right?
Absolutely, the classic postcard image.
But, beyond that image, how do you make sure your trip is not just beautiful, but also safe, respectful, and genuinely informed?
That's the key question.
So today, we're diving into this stack of sources you shared. We've got articles, travel advisories, personal accounts, to really unpack what traveling well in the Maldives means right now, mid-2025. We're pulling out the crucial bits of info, everything from maybe surprising safety issues outside the resorts, cultural need-to-knows, to the bigger picture of tourism, including a really interesting dip in visitors from one major country.
Yeah, there's quite a bit to unpack there.
Okay, let's get into it. What jumps out first from these sources? Maybe something that contrasts with that, calm paradise vibe.
Well, definitely the safety aspect, particularly the distinction the sources draw. While the Maldives overall feel safe and crime rates are low, especially on those heavily secured resort islands.
Right, the resort bubble.
Exactly. But the picture can change a bit if you venture onto inhabited islands or into urban spots like the capital, Malé, or Addu city down south.
Okay.
The sources flag that this is where tourists might run into specific kinds of scams.
Scams in paradise.
Yeah.
Really? What sort of things should people be aware of?
Yeah, a few seem to crop up. There's one they call the live aboard scam. This targets people booking boat trips.
Okay.
It could be fake websites taking your money for a luxury cruise that, well, doesn't exist. Or maybe you pay for a fancy boat and end up on something much less impressive.
Ouch.
And similarly, booking scams, fake agents taking payment for guest houses or tours. You show up and, uh-oh, no reservation.
Wow, arriving to find you've got nowhere to stay. That's a nightmare start.
Definitely. And then on the ground, especially near ATMs in busier places, the sources mention ATM scams.
How do those work?
Might be overly friendly locals offering help if the machine seems, tricky. They could actually be trying to skim your card details.
Okay. Be wary of too much help.
Right. Then there are taxi scams, apparently common in Malé and Addu. Drivers might forget the meter or take a suspiciously long route.
The scenic road, huh?
Pretty much, yeah. And watch out for bar and pub scams, especially noted in places like Addu, Fuvahmulah, and Malé. Groups might sort of latch onto tourists, order lots of pricey drinks, and then pressure the tourists to foot the entire bill.
That sounds awkward and expensive. So, okay. Knowing the names is one thing, but what's the practical advice from the sources on actually avoiding these?
It really boils down to being vigilant and verifying things. For bookings, do your research. Really check out the agent or website. Be cautious about big upfront payments.
Makes sense.
At ATMs, try to stick to machines at known banks. And definitely don't accept help from strangers. If something's wrong, go into the bank itself.
Right.
With taxis, insist on the meter before you set off. Or maybe use a mapping app on your phone just to track the route, make sure it seems reasonable.
Good idea.
In bars, just be wary of those instant friendships and definitely don't feel pressured into paying for a whole group's drinks.
Yeah, stand your ground.
And the basic stuff applies too. Keep an eye on your wallet and bags in crowded markets or beaches. Petty theft can happen anywhere busy.
And insurance.
Oh, definitely. The sources strongly recommend travel insurance as a safety net for this kind of thing.
That's really useful, practical stuff, specific to the Maldives context. Now, shifting gears a bit, the travel advisories you sent over, they mention more serious concerns. Things like potential civil unrest, terrorism risk. How does that fit in?
Yeah, this is where that difference between the secluded resorts and the populated islands becomes really crucial again.
Okay.
The advisories, like the recent ones from Australia and the UK this year, they stress that resort islands generally remain safe and secure. That's clear. However, they do note that in the greater Malé area, so Malé itself, Hulu Malé, Vilangili, and on other inhabited islands, there is a potential for public demonstrations. And these could, potentially, turn violent.
So the advice is probably just steer clear of any big political gatherings if you happen to be in those areas.
Exactly. Avoid demonstrations, keep an eye on local news, listen to advice from local authorities. Standard precautions, really.
Right.
The advisories also mention the risk of terrorism. They state attacks could happen anywhere, including tourist spots at any time. They do point to past incidents, a stabbing in Hulu Malé back in 2020, an explosion in Malé in 2021.
Okay, so it's not zero risk.
No. And the UK advisory specifically mentions that the ongoing conflict in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories could heighten this risk globally, which might potentially include the Maldives.
That definitely adds another layer. Suggests safety isn't just about, petty scams.
Right. And while the overall risk of major incidents is still seen as low, the advisories also mention ongoing issues like drug-related crime and a rise in gang violence and knife crime, particularly in those urban centers like Malé and Addu. It just reinforces that main point. Resorts are pretty much separate bubbles. But if you do go into busier local areas, especially after dark, you just need a higher level of awareness.
Okay.
But it's important to add, multiple sources also praise the Maldivian government for focusing on tourist safety. And the airport and most outlying islands are generally seen as unaffected by issues in the capital.
Okay, so be informed, be aware, especially outside the resort.
Got it. Speaking of the resort experience, let's talk water. The Maldives is all about that stunning marine environment. What are the key safety points for being out in those famous turquoise waters?
Yeah, water activities are huge, obviously. And the sources give some really practical safety tips. First up, personal safety on boats.
Right.
Always wear a life jacket on speedboats. Doesn't matter how well you swim. If they don't offer one, just ask.
Simple enough. Also, tell someone your plans, like your guest house manager, where you're going and when you expect to be back, especially if you're heading out independently.
That's smart. Just a basic check-in.
Exactly. And be honest about your swimming and snorkeling skills, particularly if you're going into deeper water. Don't be afraid to use a buoyancy vest if you're not totally confident.
Good advice. No shame in that.
None at all. Avoid swimming alone. Definitely avoid swimming at night. Visibility is a big issue. And stick to designated safe swimming zones. This is especially important on local islands, which might not have the lifeguards or safety flags you see at resorts.
And the ocean itself, currents and conditions can change quickly, can't they?
They absolutely can.
Yeah.
So be aware of currents. Trust your gut if conditions feel iffy or difficult. Just get out of the water.
Right.
And basic stuff, too, like making sure your snorkel or dive gear actually fits properly. That's essential.
Beyond what you do, I guess choosing who you go out with matters too. The tour operator.
Oh, hugely important. The sources really stress choosing safe and ethical operators.
Ethical in what way?
Look for certifications, like P80 for diving safety standards, or green fins, that's about environmentally responsible marine tourism.
Okay.
Ask them about their safety measures before you book. What are their emergency plans? How's their equipment maintained? Watch how they operate, too. Do they give proper safety briefings? Do the guides check conditions first? And critically, do they follow codes of conduct around marine life, like not touching, feeding, or chasing animals?
So respect for the environment is actually tied into safety and choosing a good operator.
It really is. You should maintain a respectful distance from marine animals, sharks, rays, whatever. Encounters are usually fine, non-threatening, but give them space. A good guide will show you how.
Right.
And the sources encourage travelers to hold operators accountable, give feedback. If you see unsafe practices or someone harming marine life, report it to local authorities or conservation groups. It helps protect everyone, future visitors, and the ecosystem itself, which is incredibly fragile.
That's a really thorough look at safety, both on land and in the water. Now let's pivot a bit to the cultural side. The Maldives is, of course, a country with deep traditions, mainly Islamic. One source described it as a fascinating contrast with the more liberal tourism sector.
That contrast is absolutely key to navigating the Maldives respectfully, particularly when you step outside the resorts.
Okay.
The Maldives is overwhelmingly a Sunni Muslim country. Now, resort islands operate under their own more relaxed rules. You can drink alcohol, guests wear swimwear, that kind of thing.
Right.
But daily life on the local inhabited islands and in Malé, that's deeply shaped by Islamic beliefs and customs.
So cultural etiquette is something you really need to be mindful of away from your resort.
Critically important, yeah. Simple things go a long way. Using common greetings like Assalamu alaikum is appreciated. Maldivians are often described as really warm, friendly people. A smile is valued. You might even get a welcoming coconut drink. That's a traditional gesture.
Nice touch. What about language? How do you communicate?
Divahi is the official language. But English is widely spoken, especially in tourist areas and by people working in hospitality.
Okay.
Still, knowing even a few basic Divahi words like shukriya for thank you or hithamahuri for sorry, it shows respect, it's appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Just as important as words, though, is the nonverbal stuff.
Nonverbal. Like what?
Well, in the Maldives, the right hand is generally seen as clean or pure. The left hand, less so.
Okay, I think I've heard of this.
So it means you should try to use your right hand for things like handing something to someone, receiving things, pointing even at places, not just people, or eating, especially if you're eating with your hands.
What if you're left-handed?
If you're left-handed, just make a conscious effort to use your right for these interactions outside the resort context. It's noticed.
What else?
Feet are considered unclean, so avoid pointing the soles of your feet at anyone. Don't step over someone if they're sitting low. Tucking your feet under you when you sit is good practice. And avoid touching someone on the head, even a child. The head is considered sacred.
Okay, so right hand for interactions. Mindful of feet, no head patting. Got it.
Are there specific things around, say, dining etiquette? Yeah, dining often involves sharing food, served family style. Eating with fingers using the right hand, of course, is common. They usually provide a finger bowl.
Right.
Eating on the floor is traditional in homes, but it's generally not seen as rude if a tourist asks for cutlery.
Okay.
It's also good practice to praise the food, ideally never refuse if offered, and try to only take what you can eat to avoid waste. Oh, and wait to be invited before you start eating.
So quite a few points there. More than just enjoying the meal. What about tipping? Is that
Mhm.
expected, like in the U.S. maybe?
Tipping is definitely becoming more common, and it's certainly appreciated, but it's not always as ingrained or mandatory everywhere as in some Western countries.
How does it work then?
Many resorts automatically add a service charge, usually 10–12%, which gets shared among the staff. But giving extra cash tips for really good service is still customary. Maybe say $1, $5 a day for housekeeping, $1 per bag for porters.
And restaurants or guides?
In restaurants that don't add a service charge, 5–10% is pretty standard. For excursion guides or boat crew, maybe $10–20 per day for the main guide seems appropriate based on the sources.
And how should you give it?
Giving tips in cash and directly to the person you want to thank is often the best way.
Good to know those details. Now, how do the religious beliefs affect the practical side of daily life for a visitor?
Quite significantly, again, outside the resorts, the work week is Sunday to Thursday, Friday and Saturday are the weekend.
Okay, different rhythm.
Yeah. And daily prayer times are observed. The call to prayer happens 5 times a day. You'll hear it broadcast from mosques. Shops or offices might close briefly, maybe for 15 minutes or so after each call. Just minor delays, usually.
And Ramadan.
Ah, yes, if you happen to be visiting during Ramadan, the holy month of fasting, you need to be particularly respectful. Avoid eating, drinking, smoking, or public displays of affection outside of the resorts from dawn until sunset. Many local cafes and eateries will be closed during daylight hours then, too.
That's a really crucial point for planning a trip or just knowing what to expect if you're there then. What about visiting mosques?
Generally, visits to mosques aren't permitted for non-Muslims unless it's part of a specific organized tourist activity. If you do visit any religious site, though, proper modest dress is an absolute must.
Which brings us nicely to dressing more generally. That seems like another area where that resort versus local island distinction is vital.
Absolutely essential. On resort islands, it's relaxed. Casual beachwear, swimsuits, shorts fine on the beach around the pool. Maybe have a cover-up for walking through restaurants or lobbies just out of politeness.
Right.
But on local islands or in the capital Malé, modesty is really important. It's expected. You should cover your shoulders and knees.
So what does that mean in practice?
For women, think things like maxi dresses, longer skirts, trousers, blouses that aren't too revealing. For men, long pants or trousers and shirts with sleeves are appropriate.
And swimwear.
Swimwear is only okay on the resort beaches or on specific designated bikini beaches that some local islands have set up for tourists. Nowhere else on local islands.
Okay, so definitely pack layers and be ready to dress differently depending on where you are. What about alcohol?
Alcohol is strictly regulated. It's basically limited. You can only get it in licensed places, which really means the resorts and the live-aboard boats.
Can you bring your own?
No, it's illegal to bring alcohol into the country yourself. You also shouldn't be under the influence when you arrive. And consuming alcohol on local islands is a definite no-no.
That's a very clear line then. Are there any other prohibited items that might catch visitors by surprise?
Yeah, a few, mostly based on Islamic beliefs. Importing pork or pork products is prohibited. Visitors also shouldn't bring in non-Islamic religious materials, things like Bibles or idols, the sources mention. Drug laws are extremely strict. Possession carries severe penalties.
Right.
And all forms of pornography are illegal. That includes things some people might not think of, like magazines with scantily clad people or even sex toys.
Okay, That list definitely includes things some travelers might not even consider. So, armed with all this on safety and culture,
Hmm.
let's look at the bigger picture. Tourism itself.
Fair.
Your sources mentioned the industry overall is doing really well, hitting record numbers even.
That's right.
But they also highlighted a very specific weak spot, a sharp drop in visitors coming from India.
Yes, and this is where things get really interesting, connecting local tourism to wider regional relations. The Maldives did see record tourism in 2024. They actually surpassed 2 million visitors,
Wow.
which was a healthy jump from 2023. And that growth apparently continued into early 2025. A lot of this was driven by key markets bouncing back. China, for instance, became the top source market again in 2024 after their travel restrictions ended. Ah, okay.
Russia has remained strong in second place, and traditional European markets like the UK and Germany also saw growth.
So booming generally, but India is the big exception.
A very significant one, yeah. India was actually the #1 source of tourists from 2021 right through to 2023. They were sending over 200,000 visitors each year.
That's a lot.
Huge. But in 2024, India dropped way down to sixth place. Arrivals fell by roughly 37.5%, down to just over 130,000.
Wow, nearly 40% drop.
And that decline continued into early 2025. As of late March this year, Indian arrivals were reportedly down about 13% compared to the same time last year. It's a really dramatic turnaround for what was their top market just recently.
That is dramatic. What happened? What's behind such a sharp fall?
Well, the sources point to a few things hitting at once. The immediate trigger seems to have been a diplomatic spat between the Maldives and India that really flared up late in 2023.
Political issues. Yes. It was linked to the Maldives' new president adopting more of an India-out policy stance. And crucially, some Maldivian officials made some pretty derogatory comments on social media about India's leadership.
Ooh, never a good move.
No, it caused widespread outrage in India. You had hashtag boycott Maldives campaigns trending online, leading to a lot of travel cancellations.
So a political and diplomatic incident directly impacted tourism numbers, just like that.
Exactly. But it wasn't just that. There's also increased competition for Indian tourists now.
How so?
During the pandemic, the Maldives was one of the few really appealing, accessible options for Indians wanting an international break.
Right, they were open when others weren't.
Precisely. But now, other places like Thailand, Bali, Dubai, they're all fully open again and actively marketing to Indians. Even India's own islands, like Lakshadweep and the Andamans, are being pushed heavily domestically as, more affordable alternatives.
Okay.
And economic factors probably play a part too. A Maldives trip isn't cheap, and the value of the Indian rupee affects how affordable it feels.
So it sounds like a perfect storm, really, causing this slump.
Yeah.
What's the Maldivian tourism industry doing about it? Are they trying to win back the Indian market?
Oh, absolutely. They're actively working on it. One big effort the sources highlighted is a new partnership with the Mumbai Indians.
The cricket team.
Yeah, one of India's most popular cricket teams. Cricket is massive in India, obviously. Visit Maldives is now their official tourist destination partner for the 2025 IPL season.
Interesting strategy.
The idea is clearly to leverage the team's huge fan base, use the players in digital campaigns and events, and try to reignite that positive feeling towards the Maldives.
Partnering paradise with India's favorite sport seems quite strategic.
It is. They've actually set a target, attract 200,000 Indian tourists in 2025, basically aiming to get back to those pre-slump numbers.
Ambitious.
This big marketing push is happening alongside diplomatic efforts to mend fences. The Maldivian government has apparently made overtures. The president invited more Indian tourists. The officials who made the controversial remarks were removed.
So it's a combined approach, marketing diplomacy, plus tapping into cultural connections like cricket.
Exactly. Analysts quoted in the sources note that while marketing alone might not fix it if political tensions flare up again, this combination, plus the fact that the Maldives still has a generally positive image in India, could lead to a rebound.
Makes sense.
The industry is watching very closely. The Indian market is really valuable, especially because Indians often travel during their summer holidays, which happens to be the Maldives' off-peak season for European visitors, so it helps fill rooms.
Ah, that's key.
Yeah, the slump has definitely meant significant lost revenue already. The message coming from the Maldives now, as one source put it, seems pretty clear. Dear Indians, you are welcome here.
So that was our deep dive into your sources on the Maldives. We've covered, well, quite a lot.
We have.
From being aware of those potential scams and crucial water safety tips to navigating the really important nuances of cultural etiquette shaped by Islamic beliefs, understanding that layered reality of safety, especially away from the resorts. And even exploring those shifting tides in global tourism, particularly that significant drop in Indian visitors and the big efforts now underway to, well, woo them back.
Yeah, a lot of ground covered.
Navigating a place like the Maldives, it really means appreciating not just the stunning natural beauty, those idyllic resorts we all picture,
Right.
but also understanding the cultural contrasts, the practical realities that exist, especially if you do decide to venture beyond that resort bubble.
Absolutely.
Being informed about everything from, dressing modestly on local islands, the significance of using your right hand, to understanding potential risks in urban areas and why travel insurance is probably a good idea. It can just make such a difference in having a trip that's smooth, respectful, and genuinely meaningful.
Well said. It's about informed travel.
Ultimately, traveling responsibly, traveling with awareness.
Yeah.
It's about showing real respect for the local culture and people, while also, taking sensible steps to look after your own well-being in what is a truly unique destination.
Couldn't agree more.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, something to maybe think about. Considering that delicate balance you described between the sort of liberal, globalized tourism industry and the Maldives' deeply rooted Islamic traditions,
Yeah.
and seeing how major regional geopolitical events, like that diplomatic row with India, can directly impact who visits and how they might feel welcomed. What does all this mean for the future of travel? Not just to the Maldives, but maybe to other places like it, where culture and commerce meet the complexities of our interconnected world.
That is a big question to ponder.